This plant right here is an Aglaonema, and it's probably the easiest plant that I have in my entire collection in regards to care. And in my opinion, this genus is probably one of the most underrated, as they're just a very low maintenance, easygoing plant, and it just looks good all the time. So I have a couple different varieties that I want to show you guys. I'm going to show you how to propagate this as well. I do have an example propagating currently in water, plus I have a couple plants, the stumps, that I want to show you kind of what to expect when you prune these plants. So let's check it out. There may be a few reasons why you'd want to prune and propagate, but generally you shouldn't have to prune these. One of the most common problems with these plants is as they push out new growth, the lower leaves will start to turn yellow and fall off, like this one right here. It just pushed out this beautiful leaf, and it is discarding of this leaf. You can see it's turning yellow a little bit. So the problem with that is as the lower leaves fall off, then it leaves you with kind of a long and leggy stem like this one right here. Now, it's okay if you like this look, but if you want more of a compact bush style plant, so that's the reason why you'd probably want to prune this, just to kind of cut it back just so it's not so tree-like or long and leggy like this. Same with this one right here. You can see these are the previous nodes, and this is where leaves have fallen off in the past, and that's just a natural process or progression of these plants. I do have a couple example plants of these stumps remaining in the pot, so I'll show you that here in a minute, as well as actually how to prune these plants. Now, the second reason might just be for straight propagation purposes alone. You might want to start an entirely new plant, so you can take these top cuttings, you can take one cutting, place it in a container of water or soil, and you can root it, and you can have a second identical plant. Another reason is over time, as they grow, sometimes they can get a little bit wild and out of control. They can actually get quite large as well, depending on the type that you have. So for space management reasons, you might just want to cut back a couple stems. Otherwise, you shouldn't really have to prune these, but like I said, if they get a little bit long and leggy like this, and you just don't like that look, I'm going to show you what to do in a couple minutes here. I'll be chopping back this one right here, but there's basically two ways to propagate these plants. You can do stem cutting, or you can do it by division. So it sends out these little rhizomes under the soil. It produces new offshoots, and you can divide those into entirely new plants. For stem cuttings, you can either do water propagation or just straight soil. I've never done the soil method, but it's pretty straightforward. But yeah, I just prefer the water method, just so I can monitor and just watch those roots as they grow. Now, despite what you see or read on the internet, you cannot grow an entirely new plant from a single leaf or the petiole. You do need a section of the stem right here, and the reason why is because you need to look for little areas like this dot right here, or this one. These little dots are where the new growth is going to come from, so these are referred to as the growing eye or growth point. So when you make the chop, say like, let's go over here. Say I make the chop right up top here, you're going to get a new growth point from right down here, as well as other nodes or other growing eyes along the stem. It's going to activate these growth points, and you may get one branch or you may get multiple branches. Now, when you take the top cutting and place it in water, you're going to get some roots, but not necessarily any new growth from the growth point. You're just going to continue to get growth from the top. So here are the two that I have, and although it doesn't look the greatest when they're just like little stumps, but here's what I mean. You can see right there a growth point has been activated. They look like little horns, one right there and one right here as well. So this one stem is going to have 3 branches, and eventually they'll get nice and full again like that one. This one, so far, it's only activated the one at the top, but you can see there are some growing eyes here as well that should be activated. And then this little sprout right down here is a side shoot from the rhizome. So this is an entirely new plant which has sprouted off from these other stems in the pot. Now here's another example. This is the green papaya. This is one that I have propagating in water right now, the top cuttings, and you can see there's multiple areas or multiple nodes that have been activated. So on this stem, there's a couple right there. The stems themselves are really close together, so I might actually repot this one just to show you how to do the division method as well, because here is a side shoot. This is a top cutting. It's a new growth from, I'm going to be assuming, this stem right there. You can see there's a little bit of growth popping through on this one as well. There's a new branch starting from this. So this is kind of what to expect when you take the top cuttings. Like I said, they're not the nicest looking plants, but in a few months they're going to be nice and full again. This one right here, I believe I took the cutting probably about 3 months ago. So depending on the amount of light that you get, the higher light, the faster growth you're going to get. Now, obviously, that doesn't mean just, you know, to go toss this in high light or, you know, direct sunlight and expect an explosion of growth. You're probably going to burn some leaves. These plants are generally known for being low light or medium plants, medium light plants. So yeah, don't put them in direct sunlight expecting them to just explode with growth, but this is kind of what to expect over a couple months. So this is the top, or the tops to this plant right here. This is the green papaya. It's probably one of my favorite varieties. It just has a beautiful speckling on the leaves, as well as kind of almost like a reddish pink vein. It's an absolutely beautiful plant. This one is a fairly slow growing one. And yeah, this one's been, like I said, propagating in water for probably a few months now. And you can see it's got some beautiful roots on it. I think these roots look super cool. They just look like little alien feet or whatever. This can be ready to be potted up in soil. Generally, I would say, you know, 1 to 2 inches in root length would be sufficient for a soil or transferring it to soil. So I'll talk about that as well, because there are some things you need to do when taking a water propagated plant into soil, just so it doesn't kind of go into shock. So we'll do that after this. I'm going to grab that other one. I will show you where to make the cuts. We'll chop the tops off, and then we'll have another plant that looks like just a stumpy mess. What I normally do is I'll let it grow to about this length. That way I can cut it in the middle. I'll have a sufficient area for roots to grow when I place it in water, but I'll also have enough of those nodes to be activated. Hopefully I can get multiple on one stem, and then it can be again another bushy plant. So that's what I'm looking for, is somewhere in the middle. And what I'm going to do is choose an area. I'm going to prune this one here first. I'm just going to look at the back side. So there is a growth point or node right there. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to cut just above that. So in between 2 nodes, and cut just above that growth point. I don't want to slice that. So something like that for this one. Just untangle this. It's all a tangled mess. And now I'll have a section of stem like that. The growth point is on the back side, but I also have a number of other growth points along this one here as well. And if you happen to nick a growth point, don't worry about it. It's going to activate, it's going to grow. So for this next one, I'm going to go just a little bit lower. I don't want them all to be the exact length. That's just my preference. You can prune it, cut it however you want. I'm going to cut this one a little bit shorter, but I'm going to go closer to the top node in case there's a growth point around the backside. So I'm just going to cut it like that, and we'll have a section of stem like this I can propagate in water. And then I'm just going to kind of go around and do the same with the other 2 here. There's a growth point right there on this one. So I'm going to cut above that growth point, right up, below that node, like that. Set that aside. And this last one, same thing. I'm just going to, here's a node right there, so I'm just going to cut just above that one, like that. Now we have some stumps. Now after that, some of these lower leaves that are already turning yellow, this one is just not looking the greatest. I'll just pull these ones off, just like that. They come off quite easily, and that way I have a nice section of stem like that. So you can just throw this in the compost, throw it away. I'm just going to look at this one, make sure all these leaves are looking okay. This one has a couple lower leaves, especially this one right here. It's just looking a little bit faded. It's looking a little bit yellow. So I'm going to just peel off this one as well as this one. And yeah, this one's not looking the greatest. I don't even know if I'm going to keep this one, to be honest. I will. I'll keep it. like that. This one is, I believe, the Golden Madonna, and occasionally I will see kind of some sticky sap along the petiole, sometimes on the leaves. Now I know these are susceptible to mealybugs and that sort of thing, but I do believe they can get just some sappy substance. They excrete it. So just be mindful of pests, mealybugs, scale, anything like that. I've looked this one over really thoroughly, and I don't see any signs of mealybugs or scale. I'm not saying that there isn't any. Just be cautious if you see a sappy substance, then it might be pest related or it might be natural. Now in a moment, I'm gonna swap out these freshly cut top cuttings with the ones that have been rooting in water. So I'm gonna pot these up in the soil, then I'm going to be placing these ones in that container so it can grow roots and I can get an entirely new plant from this one. But what I like to say is, I don't let these callus over. So they're already starting to kind of dry up, but there doesn't have to be anything special. I don't put any rooting hormone on the ends. I don't put any cinnamon or anything like that. I just literally take the cutting and stick it in a container of water, put it in a kind of a bright area, obviously no direct sunlight, and I've never had any issues. Now, I'm not saying that there isn't a potential for rot or anything like that. Now, what I might do is cover it with something, or maybe let it callus for a couple hours before I stick it in soil. That way, in case there's anything in the soil in regards to like bacteria or fungus, then it's not going to transfer to the fresh cut. But otherwise, I've never really had any issues. Now, I'm not saying that, you know, it won't happen or anything like that, but just this is what I do. So take it with a grain of salt, I guess. If you want to let it callus over before you place it in soil, then that's what you can do as well. But generally, I don't. I went out to the shed and I grabbed 2 pots. This is a clear plastic. If I'm using a plastic pot, I prefer to use the clear ones. It's a thicker plastic, and I just prefer to be able to watch the roots grow. I did choose a terracotta pot as well. Now, one is not better than the other. The most important thing is that you just want to make sure that they have drain holes in the pot. Now, if you are a fairly heavy water or you water frequently, then terracotta is probably a good choice for you. It's very porous, it absorbs soil moisture, and it dries out quicker. If you're an underwaterer like myself, then plastic nursery pot or these plastic pots are probably a good choice. I like using terracotta just simply for the look. I like the contrast, so when you place the plant in the pot, I think the contrast between the terracotta look, or whatever, the orange-brown, in contrast with the green leaves, just makes it pop. So I like using terracotta for that reason. I probably should be using this pot just because I tend to let them get a little bit drier than they should. For pot size, you can see I went with something, I think this is probably a 6-inch pot. You don't want to go with something too small, but you don't want to go with something too large. So you can see there's plenty of room for the roots to grow. If you pick a pot that's too large, you're just going to have way too much soil volume, and when you water it, it's going to stay wet or damp for longer. Those roots aren't going to be able to soak up that moisture fast enough, and that's when you run into the root rot issues. So you definitely don't want to choose something that's too large, and you can definitely upsize down the road once it outgrows this pot, but it's probably going to be okay in this pot for probably a couple years. For soil, I'm just going to be using a regular old tropical plant mix. I know this does have some perlite in there. Now, these plants, these Eggley I know, I don't want to say they like damp or wet soil, but I know they can tolerate the soil being a little bit more damp for longer compared to, say, like a philodendron or monstera, that kind of thing. If the soil stays wet for an extended period of time, then that's when you run into root issues, root rot. But I find these can tolerate it just a little bit more than a philodendron, monstera, all those other different types of aroids. Now, with that being said, I tend to let them get really dry. So that's why I'm going to be using this mix compared to like an aroid mix. It'll get way too dry, and yeah, it'll just be a nightmare. So because I'm underwater, I'm going to use a soil that retains moisture for a little bit longer. So hopefully that all makes sense, because sometimes I just tend to ramble on. I like to keep the cuttings nice and close together, almost like a bouquet of flowers, as opposed to spacing them out. So I'm going to keep them like, I'm just arranging them like that. Might space them out just a little bit when I place them in the pot. I'll put a little bit of soil in the pot here first, just to add kind of a base layer, and then I can arrange the cuttings as I go. So something like that. And you can see this is just a nice kind of fluffy mixture. And I'm going to hold these cuttings in place. I don't want to place them or plant them too deep. I might actually put a little bit more soil in the bottom. Just lightly pack that down, just so they can rest right on the top like that. I'm going to hold these cuttings in place, and then I'm just going to add soil in around the cuttings here. Just lightly packing it down. And then afterwards, I'm going to give these a good soaking, just because when you have plants growing in water and you transfer them to soil, you don't want them to dry out, because those water roots, they will dry out very, very quickly. So I'll keep this well watered, pretty well damp for the next 2 weeks at least. And then I'll slowly kind of cut back to a regular watering routine. That way it gives these roots a chance to transition to soil. And now I'm going to give this one some water, and then we'll place those other cuttings in this glass container so that those ones can root as well. But now you have a nice full pot of Aglaonema, a second pot of these beautiful, beautiful plants. I gave this one some water, and look how beautiful it looks. Just a nice full pot. It's like it's from the store again. Just a nice full pot of these Aglaonema. Like I said, this one is probably one of my favorites, just because of the leaf color. It's kind of like, yeah, like a yellow, kind of light green speckling with this red pink vein. So it's an absolutely beautiful variety. Now, I did get some fresh water, so I filled the container up, and you can see the ends have somewhat calloused over, so it's been probably like 45 minutes. Now all I'm gonna do is just stick them in the container. And this is all you need to do for water propagation. Uh-oh, I think these stems are too thick. So I might have to actually get a larger container. But I think it looks awesome just like this. So like it looks like a bouquet of flowers. You can put this on a table, make sure it's getting enough light. But otherwise, the top cutting will grow into a new plant like this one in a matter of a few months. So you don't have to have these plants looking leggy. It can easily be corrected into a nice, beautiful plant like this again. And just for demonstration purposes, I'm going to take this one out of the pot just to show you the division method. And I'm actually curious to see what the roots look like on this one as well. So I'm just going to loosen up the soil. Okay, so here is an example of dry root rot, or dry rot. These brown roots, they're super dry. They just peel right off. So this had some root rot. So I'm glad I kind of took this apart just to kind of have a peek at it. There's a few areas right here. This is how you get a new side growth. So it sprouts off from the rhizome, it pushes out this growth point, and eventually the growth point will poke out above the soil line. You can see there's some nice healthy white roots. I'm just going to peel off all these brown roots. I'm just going to set them off to the side here. Generally, I don't reuse soil that has had root rot in the past, but I might actually use this or reuse it because it's not really an overly special plant. Oh, here's another growth point. So you got two little horns. These little growth points are going to sprout above the soil line. So what you can do is take a pencil, remove as much soil as you can, find out where a plant, these might actually be separate plants. So I'm just going to pull these ones apart. So this is a separate plant, but it has connected right here. So all you can do is take your pruning shears or a knife, and you can, I'm just trying to find where it actually attaches to. Looks like right here. So I'm just going to cut this stem off like that. So you'll have a separate cutting with its own root system. It looks like it was attached. Where did I make the cut? Right here? No, that's not it. Yeah, maybe that was it. Right there. So it was attached right here. It just sprouted off this side. I probably could have cut a little bit lower, but I just couldn't see. But now I have two cuttings. This one has some rot here as well. I'm just going to peel all that off. But once it establishes some more roots, then you can see it's getting a new growth point right there. Let's see. So yeah, basically you can just pull them apart. Here's another one. It's connected right down here. So I'm just going to cut this one. Something like that. And that's how you do the division method. So it made a little side shoot from right there. It pushed out this stem. So they're connected and I cut them. So it's super easy to separate them. You can just literally pull them apart. You can cut them. Here's another growth point from the bottom of this one. So it's super, super easy. The soil in the bottom of the pot here is still fine. The pot size is probably a bit too large, but I'm just going to arrange these. Actually, it should be okay. They do have a fairly decent root system. I might actually place them a little bit lower. So I'm just going to dump some of this out. And that way I can place them lower. That way there isn't as much of like long stems kind of poking through. So I'm just going to arrange them close together, but not as close as they were. They were literally like kind of butted up against each other. So I'm going to push this one down a bit too. And then some of these smaller ones I'm just going to put along the side. Like that. And one more right kind of in the middle, just like that. And now I'm just going to place some soil just around those cuttings, filling in all the gaps. Again, it's a super easy method to propagate these plants if you want to make more plants from the ones that you have. And then I'm going to give these ones some water as well. So dry rot is a real thing, and that's typically what I have an issue with. So whenever you let a plant get too dry and then you give it water, it basically rots the roots. So it's the same as like root rot if you were to keep it wet, but I just let mine get way too dry. Again, that's probably why I should be using a plastic pot. Now, shake that down, and then I'm going to give this one some water as well. Just like that. This beautiful specimen right here is the Silver Bay. This is probably one of the most common varieties that you'll find like at any big box store and that sort of thing. I believe I got this one at like Home Depot or Rona, something like that. That's what makes these plants so great, is not only are they fairly common, but they're also very affordable. Now, I've kind of already touched on some basic care kind of throughout the video, like with watering and that sort of thing. But for light, these Aglaonemias are advertised as low light tolerating plants. Now, low light doesn't mean no light. At least you have to have some light source. So I would place these kind of in maybe like a 200-foot candle range. So that is low light. And then even upwards of to like 500 is kind of ideal. So 200 to 500-foot candles. If you don't have a light meter, you can get one on your phone, or you can buy a digital light meter from Amazon or something like that, just to kind of give you a rough range of the amount of light that it's receiving at different times of the day. So 200 to 500 is kind of what I would normally recommend. For soil, I kind of already touched on that. You just want to have something that's maybe a little bit more moisture retentive. For fertilizer, I try and fertilize about once a month in its growing season. Right now, as it's entering fall and winter, I'll cut back not only on my watering, but fertilizer as well. So as long as it's still pushing out growth, then I will continue to water as normal and I will continue to fertilize. Obviously, if it's pushing out new growth like this one right here, then it still needs those nutrients and water. Now for pests, I kind of already touched on a little bit, but these are kind of prone to mealybugs. I have had a couple in the past that have had mealybugs. Otherwise, they're just like any other tropical plant. You can get spider mites, thrips, all that kind of stuff. But the biggest problem I've had is mealybugs, and that was only the one time like 2 years ago. So in in comparison to, say, like philodendrons, these are way more, I would say, pest resistant. I really haven't had any issue with this plant. So that's why I consider these a fairly easygoing plant, as long as you give them their very basic requirements. You know, kind of that low to medium light, give them water, don't let them get too dry like I do, then you really shouldn't have a problem. Now, when you have a plant that has more variegation, so if you have a variety that has lots of white in the leaves, you're probably going to need to have that in a brighter location, just because white doesn't contain chlorophyll and it's not able to photosynthesize. So ones with higher variegation, white in the leaves, they need higher light. These varieties, yeah, although they have like lighter green, these ones are your ones that can tolerate like a dark corner in the back of your living room kind of thing. Yeah, these ones. Super, super easy. So I absolutely love these plants, and like I said, I think they're one of the most underrated plants out there. Common plants, but they look beautiful all the time, and there's many different varieties out there. So I think that's gonna be pretty much it for this video. I hoped it helped not only with your plant care, but knowing how to prune and propagate these, just to make them look like a bushier, fuller plant again, instead of just those long sticks sticking out of the soil with leaves on top. If you have any comments or questions, please leave it down below in the comment section. Otherwise, thanks again for watching my videos. Take care, everyone. Bye.